Welcome to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. We're tackling miscommunication with the power of understanding. We're growing our mastery of the foundation of teamwork and of all relationships. And so I want to ask you to help me spread the word about stronger, more effective communication by inviting some friends to listen along with you. Then discuss what you've learned and give me your feedback. What would you like to hear from us in future episodes so we can make this podcast even more effective? Thanks for joining me. Let's jump in. Well, this is our 50th episode since we started doing weekly episodes. So welcome to episode 50. And to celebrate episode 50, I thought I would dig in a little to a topic that I've mentioned multiple times, but I've never really investigated it in depth. And that's the whole idea that communication needs to be a key performance indicator for our businesses. I recognize for some of our small business listeners that the whole idea of a key performance indicator is a little bit of a technical jargon term. So let me just explain. You measure your sales, you measure your profit, you even check on your utility bills so that you know what your expenses are. Well, I'm suggesting that we need to be measuring our communication in some useful ways so that we can tell whether it's contributing or hindering our businesses. And so I want to talk today about the whole idea of communication as a key performance indicator that's hidden, but it's in plain sight. It's obvious that communication is vital to our businesses, but seldom do businesses take the time to measure key performance indicators like communication. So I've done some research. I'm going to be looking at my papers a little bit more on this episode, but how we communicate internally and externally is something that we so often fail to give proper attention to, and yet it's vital. It's almost like the foundation or the heartbeat of our business, because every business communicates in multiple ways. So let me explain, first of all, why I think communication is a key performance indicator, because it's the key that helps people to align with the goals of the business, whether it's the employees or whether it's the clients or customers. Your business is aiming at a certain goal or a certain target, a target market, or a goal in terms of what you're offering to society. And people can only align with that goal if that goal is communicated clearly and consistently and in a way that they can identify with. And so if the staff can align with the organization's objectives more clearly, then that will highlight when there are communication breakdowns, because they'll say, wait, this isn't where we're going. This isn't what we're doing. This isn't what we want to achieve. And those communication breakdowns directly kill some of your productivity. But also, communication is a way of quantifying your impact. How much impact are we making? It's not just the sales, but also the way that people perceive the business, the way people interact with the business. All of those are also impact statements. And it's estimated, this is stats from a collaboration company in Australia called Vouch, but they said that in their studies, ineffective communication led to 46 work days lost per employee annually. That's huge, isn't it? About a month and a half of a 12-month period is wasted by miscommunication. That's terrible. And that's equated to roughly $22,000 in productivity loss per person if you measure it out by finances. And so both of those stats are really scary, that communication can have that much effect. So communication, I'm suggesting, is a leading indicator that we need to be monitoring and we need to be working at improving. It's not just a hygiene factor in the business of people getting along, but it influences the alignment of my team. It also really affects transparency within the team, as well as the trust that we have with our clients and customers. All of those things, team alignment, transparency, trust, are all upstream of any problems that may arise because communication's not working. So communication really is a key indicator that we need to focus on in our business. So having said that, let me talk a little bit about how do I measure communication, because it feels very ethereal, doesn't it? How do I measure how is communication working? There are a bunch of different key metrics that you can include, and some of these may fit better for your business than others, but see which of these would be appropriate. First of all, you can measure the engagement with your communication. Most email programs will now give you open rates. You can see how many people click on the links in any emails you're sending out. You can also see how long it takes them to respond. That would be technically called response latency. So how long does it take people to react and respond to what you're communicating to them? So the engagement of your customers with your communication is one of those key metrics that we can look at. Then also within the company, you can do surveys for employee satisfaction with communication. How clear has our communication been? How clear are you on our goals? Do you know what we're going for together? How frequent are those emails? Are they too frequent? Are they getting something every day and they could do something every week? Are they getting something every week and every 2 weeks would be better with more content but less frequency? Those kinds of things. You can survey your employees very simply these days. All kinds of free survey tools available to us. You can also survey transparency. Are you hearing what you need to hear? Are there questions that you have that are not being answered? Are we being clear as a leadership team with our whole team? But also, you can ask your employees, are the things that we're communicating relevant to what you need? What do you need to know that you're not hearing from us? Or what are we telling you that feels irrelevant? All of those survey-based, it's somewhat of a sentiment survey because you're asking people what do they feel and how do they respond, but the responses that you get to those surveys are gold in terms of measuring communication within your team. The other thing that's important, I mentioned transparency and openness. You need to be able to get a feel, and sometimes managers in the middle of the organization are the best way to do this by polling the managers. But what is the perceived openness of the leadership of the business? Openness from the top creates trust at all layers. And so when there's openness, people trust the leadership. The staff are more inclined to send information upward from the shop floor, if you like, and also that sense of trust and that sense of openness really affects retention with your staff. You know, we went through the pandemic a few years ago, and there was a huge attrition of people leaving their jobs because they felt like the pandemic exposed for them just how out of the loop they were with where their company was going or what the leadership was about. It also hinders innovation because you're not going to get ideas coming from your team if there isn't that sense of trust and openness. Another metric that you can be measuring would be the operational indicators that flow with communication. So things like how fast are projects moving forward? How many misunderstandings have we logged as we're working together on topics or on goals? How strong is our collaboration? How many people feel excluded versus included in the teamwork that we're doing? As well as how many new ideas have come forward. I hope you've got some way within your company of people offering their suggestions, their ideas, even if it's simply an anonymous suggestion box. Although these days the technology allows us to have all kinds of other ways to get that kind of innovation into the mix. As leaders of companies, we need to be receiving from the people on the ground, the people at the interface with our customers and our clients, so that we can innovate further to meet the needs that are in the groups that we're serving, in the ecosystems that we're working in, so that we can get that input and apply it to growing our effectiveness. All of these are key metrics that you can measure, and they're all connected directly to communication. And then finally, you can be measuring things like employee retention and employee advocacy, because turnover rates are directly connected to that strong internal communication that we've been talking about. There's an article in the Times in the UK by a guy called Richard Harpin. He's a regular contributor to the Times on business leadership, and he identified strong internal communication as the primary factor, if you like, in lowering turnover and also increasing employee advocacy for the business. So both ways, you're keeping the people longer and they're being more proactive and more fruitful in the way that they advocate for your company and for the bottom line. So those are some practical ways that we can raise the profile of communication as a performance indicator that we measure. When communication is measurable, then we can be more accountable for how well it's working and what we can change to make it work better. So let's be honest that it is hard to make this one of our key performance indicators. It's hard to include this in our metrics in a consistent way, partly because soft performance can be difficult to quantify. And that means that it's often overlooked in the dashboards that your HR software or your teamwork apps are offering you. But you can find ways to include it, as we already outlined. Also, as a leader in business, watch out for the tendency to focus much more on the revenue metrics or the operational metrics. Yes, of course, those are vital to the day-to-day running of your business, but if you only focus on those, it would be a little bit like always taking heart rate and blood pressure and never looking at nutrition or exercise, the things in the background that influence those things. And so if we only focus on revenue metrics and operational metrics, we're missing the area that most of our teams spend most of their time doing, which is communicating with each other and with our customers. And then it can be very easy as leaders to assume that everyone gets it. So you tend to take your eye off of communication because you think everything's just ticking along nicely. That's why I'm saying this needs to be on a dashboard somewhere, being monitored by your leadership team in some way that's measurable, so that you can tell when the danger signs begin to be seen. And in particular, with the life languages that we talk about so often, the distress flares of each language are things to have somebody in your team be watching for across the employee base. Because whenever there's an employee in distress, communication is always being hindered. And so those are items you can watch for. They're specific actions or specific words that come out when a language is in distress. So don't assume that everybody gets it. Make sure that you're validating the shared understanding of your team, but also checking your feedback loops. You've got to have ways of employees giving feedback for whether they're understanding or not. So how do I elevate communication to a KPI on my dashboard? I've got 5 different steps that you can take, and each of these will be a valuable step forward in making this a central part of your strategy. First of all, you need to define measurable communication goals. They need to be aligned with your business objectives, and they need to be clear, but they have to be measurable. And that will vary according to your business. But if you're putting in, we want to be sure that this number of emails get opened, or this percentage bring clicks to our sales funnel, or whatever it might be. And then secondly, you want to track the metrics continuously. They need to be measured constantly and also verified and communicated to the team, especially the leadership team, on a consistent basis. Maybe not daily, but certainly weekly, with a summary monthly. So click rates, open rates, response times, feedback ratings, review stars, those kinds of things, and also the transparency scores from your employees in terms of the communication internally. Track those metrics continuously. That's a big step forward. Thirdly, don't just use quantitative data, but also use qualitative data. That's where the surveys and pulse polls come in. Communication analytics apps abound today, and there are plenty of tools. A couple that come to mind would be Populo or Shift with a Y. Both of those are valuable in mid-sized businesses for being able to take these kind of metrics within your company. So use quantitative data, surely, but certainly also make sure you get the qualitative. Get people to give you their opinion, even if it's only brief, giving you their feedback in those ways. And then fifthly, there needs to be a leadership level adoption of communication as a measurement that we're monitoring, and our government at a leadership level is focused on what is the effect of good communication. So we want to communicate the status regularly to the rest of the company. Maybe that's you have a monthly town hall meeting with everybody together, or some kind of all hands meeting, whether you're remote or hybrid, some group call where you're all together, but also having a dashboard that employees can see that shows how well we're doing with communication. That ensures that there's two-way feedback, because you're giving people a voice at the table on a regular basis, but it also means that we can course correct more quickly and more easily, because everybody's aware of whether we're doing better or worse with communication. So let's just briefly summarize what we've said, because I think this really is a vital central part of our business strategy. We want to focus on alignment, because that prevents us becoming siloed and then wasting work time, wasting work effort, because we're not aware of what's going on with other teams. We want to encourage and promote engagement, where every team knows that they are committed to a common goal, or they're committed to something that moves us forward toward our vision. That reduces turnover, because feeling irrelevant or sidelined is always the first step towards somebody leaving for something better. So engagement is the second key theme for communication. The third would be clarity. Most companies would be surprised to realize how little clarity they enjoy within their employee base. But when we have clarity, it reduces having to redo work. It speeds up decision making, because we know all of the factors that are in play. All of these things come from good communication. And then the culture and trust of your business, your internal culture really affects your profitability and your engagement with all your stakeholders. And so accountability can really be built by that culture of trust, as well as the transparency with your customers and your clients. So they really understand why they're engaged with you, and they are enjoying being engaged with a company that's serving their goals and meeting their needs. So communication is not just a support function, it really is the foundation that your business is built on. And when we track it carefully, we track it thoughtfully, then it really becomes a visible key performance indicator, a data-driven key performance indicator. It can drive efficiency, it can drive engagement. It certainly will have a big impact on the business outcomes. So if you'd like more information on this, I did a bunch of research on this. I think I've got about 5 or 6 different academic papers that support some of the points that I've made on this episode. So if you'd like me to send you the links to those papers, just send me an email after you've listened to this, and I'd be glad to forward it on to you. I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you think of somebody else who needs to hear this, would you do me a favor and send them the link to today's episode so they can join us in building communication mastery. See you again next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.